everyone and good morning to all. I am Guru Prasad from Gear Group, your material handling partner for logistics. Mr. Manish Walia, CEO Gear Group, and the entire team of Gear heartily welcomes the panelists and all the participants to this webinar on Raising to the Challenges of Logistics Operation Cost and Service. The present situation of the pandemic has forced all of us to learn new things to work, new ways of working. This situation made Gear team to think how to learn from industry experts as well as share the knowledge to supply chain professionals from various industries. Oh, I see now that close to 1,500 has been the registration of participants for this webinar. Thank you everyone for registering. The emerging industry segment for India is likely to be set into FMCG, pharma, third-party logistics, as well as manufacturing industries. The panelists that we have today for this webinar are from various industry segments, and I am happy to inform that most of them are coming from the emerging industries. So, without wasting time, let me introduce you to the panelists. Mr. Anupam Kashyap, founder and CEO, Argumentor Consulting. Mr. Shishir Bide, Head of Operations and Supply Chain, Cummins India. Mr. Sushil Ratti, Chief Operating Officer at Mahindra Logistics. Mr. Umesh Madhan, Associate Vice President, Strategy Transportation at Hindustan Coca-Cola. Mr. Vivek Sarabhai, Director, Customer Service at Mondelez. And Sanjay Gupta, Management Consultant. Mr. Anupam Kashyap has about 30 years of experience in varied industries profile, and he is an expert in supply chain management, manufacturing leader. He is a global business service expert, TPM, Lean and Six Sigma practitioner. Anupam is a known face in CXO circle and advisory group. Over to Mr. Anupam to give his insight on this webinar.
Thank you very much, Guru. Really honored to be here today. Now, a few very important points to put it in perspective in the discussion today. Let's just, we are living in the world the way it is today. I mean, we all know we are in lockdown. We all know we are under a siege. Our businesses are impacted. But just let's take a different view on the entire pandemic and what it has done to us. Number one, it is teaching us and telling us about social distancing. It is telling us about keeping ourselves clean, hygienic, and maintaining ourselves better. It is telling us about be aware of potential risks around you, which is in terms of what the government Arogya Setu app is, and which is telling you that if you are around someone who is infected, etc. And also it is telling us stay at home and optimize on everything that you have. Now that looks philosophical, right? And now, but the problem, the reality is that this is what 3 or 4 things we are required to take into our businesses in various forms or shape, whether we like it or not, whether we want it or not. But in order to secure our businesses in order to secure the lives of our people, in order to secure the lives and livelihoods of our societies, it is super critical that we carry these three important aspects of social distancing, keeping ourselves hygienic, being aware of potential risk around us, and staying at home as much as possible. Now, let's give an industry spin to this discussion. Now, if we have to run an industry under these four paradigms, let's call them paradigm for the want of any other word. Now, what it means for the industry, number one, social distancing essentially means that we need to be able to run our operations with lesser number of people. Potentially, we need much higher trained manpower than before, and giving a logistics spin to it. And traditionally, logistics has been considered to be a people-heavy industry, and you can have as many manpower as you want, and manpower is probably considered to be a lesser of an evil. But then that's not going to be the reality today. If we want to operate efficiently and if we want to follow the norms, what is right and required, it is super critical that we are able to reduce the manpower and also use trained manpower in place of unskilled ones that we have been using in the past. So that's one key paradigm that we need to be aware of, that we need to be reducing manpower, we need to be using more trained manpower than before, and that's what needs to be done, and we'll talk about it in later part of the discussion. Second important part is, of course, keeping oneself clean, looking at it in an industry perspective. Probably we need to maintain our assets better. We need to probably ensure the upkeep of the assets in a much better way. We cannot be calling our partners or our vendor partners or OEMs as frequently as we would like to be, or we as in the past. And thus it calls for a totally different paradigm in the way we look at our assets. They need to be much more agile and operating in this. Third important thing is, and we all know that super critical for us to be getting the data from the line, getting the data from the operations to take decisions for the business. Now, traditionally, and various forms are shaped. Some people, some organizations are ahead of others versus the others. But then from production logbooks to log. Sorry, I'm back.
You're back.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So I'll continue. Very critical to make sure that how easy or quickly can you capture the data in real time and convert it into action and analytics. Very important point is that today, if you think about it, every decision, or if I take a pessimist view of the whole thing in terms of saying that our decision making is centralized, and there are supervisors who take decisions, there are managers who take decisions, there are leaders who take decisions, etc. How about a world where decision making moves to the point of action? Because that's the demand. You may not be able to aggregate as teams as frequently as in the past. You may not be able to get together into a group as in the past. And thus you need a world where data is captured automatically. The data is moved and analyzed on a real-time basis. And decision making is pushed to the point of action, which means that type of a level of empowerment you need in the new world. That's a very important thing. And from a context point of view, we may not be able to operate with as many people as we were operating in the past. And thus, potentially, one of the very important areas is how do we reduce supervision? How do we work in a world where level of supervision required is so less that it reinforces the behaviors and the practices that are required and a must to do for us to run the business in the current context. So that brings me to the last part of my discussion where, so what do we need to be doing in the true sense of the word? Frankly, we need to talk about automation. We need to talk about how do we make, and paradoxically speaking, and in a utopian world, really think about, can we really make our operations touchless from data capture point of view, information sharing point of view, from decision-making point of view, and then converting it to real business operation and business process management point of view. So one important takeaway for us in a post-COVID-19 world would be that endeavor should be to make the operation touchless as much as possible and as much as logical. Second important related point is, of course, and a leading indicator into this is that how do we make the data capture for decision making touchless, and which means bring in the sensors, bring in the automations, bring in the various tools and tackles, bring in the integration of your ecosystem, which means get in your service providers, get in your vendors, get in your employees, get in your partners into a ecosystem, into a virtual ecosystem, which can then make the data flow more effortless. There will be, since we have to be operating potentially with 50% of the manpower, and that's the right thing to do, given the circumstances, to operate with 30% less manpower, that clearly means that, and specifically in the logistics context, will be that how do we train the manpower so that we can do more with less, which means that we need more trained and quote unquote empowered manpower to be able to run our operation, which will bring in a very strong focus on the skill management and the skill building of the team in a smart manner. Very important to mention that, see, in a conventional way, we might be looking at running the management. So we might be practicing, and again, a little philosophical here, is that we might be running the operation by management by control, which means that my supervisor knows everything that's going on in the operation. My manager takes all the decisions. My leader guides everyone on everything that is being to be done and that's being done in the operation. How about a different world where we sincerely move to a world where we are managing by exception, and any one of us, be a supervisor, be a manager, be a leader, is only made aware of the exceptions in the business, and he or she takes a decision on that versus really trying to run the operations by control. Again, a huge paradigm shift from management by control versus management by exception. But I think that is what will be the need of the hour in a operation where we need to do social distancing. We need to keep ourselves cleaner, leaner, meaner, and we also need to be aware of the potential risk, which means that the sooner and the more smoother our transition is towards management by exception and to a real-time decision making, the better it is for us to be able to live and grow in a post-COVID-19 world. Very important. And so I'll just reiterate that we will be, looks like that the realities are there to stay with us. And thus it's very important that we prepare ourselves for it in a manner that we are able to do that, and I've covered some points with reference to that. Having said this, and the last but not the least, this shall also pass. Yes, we are in a situation where we have a pressure, we have a situation, we have a business pressure, we have a business need, but I'm sure this shall also pass. Having seen in the 3 decades of my work life, various business situations, various natural calamity and other situations, I'm sure the humankind and the entire humanity will come out of it sooner than later. But let's not go back to the old world. Let's define the new world order, and I'm sure it will be a better one for all of us. Thank you very much. Back to you, Guru.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable input. Can I now have the profile of Mr. Sirish Bide, please? Yeah, Mr. Sirish Bide has more than 30 years of experience. He's an engineer, plus he has an ICWA qualification, immense knowledge on lean, production systems, Six Sigma certified. He has won many awards and appreciations to his cap. Now, may I now request Mr. Shishish to give us an insight of what he feels on these challenges. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Guru. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So good morning to all, and I would like to bring some more perspectives and add to what Anupam said already. I think one of the facts that we need to be aware of as Indians is we are really not used to social distancing. That is not in our culture, our upbringing. So this is something that we will have to learn over a period of time, and this will be the need of the hour, as I can very clearly see that this pandemic is not going to be a very short-term story, but it will be with us almost for next 1.5 years. So we have to really imbibe and learn the technique of social distancing. And I can quote a couple examples. You see our traffic, we will always bring the car so close to the car in the front. So, it is in our blood that we are not used to social distancing. We will just like to be with people as much as we can. And that is a big difference we have to bring in the industry when we look at shop floors and, for that matter, logistics services, or for that matter, any services that are running in industry. So that is going to be something which we have to learn. And for that, extensive training, awareness, and something called a concept that we are trying to put in Cummins called as safety commanders, who will really coach people every now and then that how social distancing is going to be important in the coming time. And we have to really see through all our processes. We really did a deep dive into right from the operators coming in the shop floor, doing the punching of their cards. So you have to start right from there, the social distancing. If I move backwards, it starts with the bus stops where we pick up our employees. In the buses, we have to maintain social distancing. We have to further extend it on the shop floor. And we have to really take a deep dive that how many of our processes need more than one person to operate, and whether there is enough distance available between the stations, between the workstations, between the common usage of tools, which is very, very normal in Indian industry. All these factors we will have to look at. Canteen, we just created social distancing guidelines and start implementing them, 6 feet distance. We kind of found that our capacity of canteen dropped down by 75%. Only 25% of the people can use canteen now. So we will have to really look at, increasing the number of canteen breaks and still align that in the shop floor, that we don't have any issues in running our process smoothly. Similarly, on logistics front, what we learned from our colleagues in China and colleagues in US and UK, that one of the biggest threat that they were exposed to was coming through the logistics service providers and truck drivers especially. So we will have to really be very careful in terms of identifying the opportunities that right from the entry of the people, anyone for that matter, it is a service provider or a visitor or an employee or anyone for that matter, we will have to have a strict protocol of adhering to the safety norms, hygiene, which is sanitization, using sanitizers, controlling the temperatures of people coming in, having proper medical facilities inside your setup in order to support if anyone is found with any problem in terms of higher temperature or any symptoms of coronavirus. So all these things cannot be only restricted to employees, but we have to look at a wider gamut in terms of the service providers, including the logistics service providers, warehouse service providers, and all the services that we get in our plants. Finally, I will touch base on what Anupam iterated, which is the smart manufacturing. That Industry 4 was already a buzzword even before this pandemic came in. And I think the need of the Industry 4 is going to be more and more prominent as we move along. And we need to really encourage all our stakeholders, be it employees, be it service providers, that how one can be innovative or creative in understanding that which are the areas or opportunities where we can implement Industry 4 techniques. And they need not be very high capital intensive techniques, but they can be very smart, very cost effective, but at the same time, they will ensure that we need lesser people. We don't have to really, put manpower to collect data. That should happen automatically. And that would reduce the requirement of people at one place, one site. It might not be resulting into loss of jobs, but at the same time, we can improve the efficiency and the competitiveness of our business. And at the same time, we can bring down the need of people gathering at one place, which is needed because of the needs of data collection and more manual processes and so on. So these are going to be our buzzwords as we move. So just to summarize, social distancing, very important. We have to have a big drive on training and awareness generation for all the stakeholders in the system. Industry 4, that is something that we can really drive and we can really look at every opportunity where we can implement it. We have to take a deep dive into the entire value chain and process to understand what are the areas of risk from where we will be exposed to this pandemic, and for that how we can really take care and develop this as a habit for the times to come. And last but not least is really focusing on all our age-old techniques, be it Lean, be it Six Sigma, that how we can resharpen our tools so that we are able to once again bring back all the benefits which can come out of that, which will help in this current challenging and unprecedented times. So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable inputs. May I now request to have the profile of Mr. Sushil Rathi, please. Mr. Sushil has more than 30 years of experience in supply chain management, in manufacturing, as well as retail vertical. He is also a director on board of Lord's Freight and 2x2 Logistics. May I now request Mr. Sushil to take over and give his insights on the webinar, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we are witnessing today in the world has never been there. I mean, we are going through a real crisis. But at the same time, my belief is such crises also bring new opportunities for us to relook at the way we are living our life, opportunities for us to relook at the way we are doing the business, and everything can be now changed. In fact, the lockdown of now more than 5 weeks has taught us a lot of things. For example, we have learned how to work from home. We have learned how to manage within the reduced means. We are not going after expensive things. We have learned how not to spend beyond our requirements, because at the time lockdown is there, you're not able to either go out or buy anything which is banned by the government. So this has really taught us how to change the whole mechanism of how you are living your life, as well as how you can do the business. My firm belief is that going forward, one of the major change which you will see, and which every company will surely work upon, is to see how to reduce the manpower, either in factories, in the warehouses, or even in offices. They will start identifying the kind of work which can easily be handled by working from home. Now, a company like us, which is in logistics space and which requires the physical movement of goods, etc., may not be able to adopt to a great extent like an IT company. An IT company probably can look at more than 50% staff or 75% staff working from home. But for a logistics company, that may be naturally difficult. But when we start seriously thinking about it, there are various possibilities which are there in terms of reducing the footfalls in some of these places. We can very clearly see there are various jobs which we can do from home. So the corporate offices or head offices probably will see a different order being created. We also see that there are a lot of possibilities of doing automation in the warehouses or factories, which will further meet the objective of social distancing by reducing the manpower. We also believe that a lot of changes in the processes will take place, or it has to take place, whether the industry comes together, whether, for example, logistics service provider and logistics users come together, or whether it comes by a directive from the government. But many of these processes will undergo a change, and which will be beneficial in long run. Just to pick up one example of that is, let's look at in the transportation industry. One of the biggest problem is in terms of the POD collection. And there is a lot of physical movement of paper, signatures, and later on, taking all the PODs, submitting it to your customers. Not only that, the whole process is a very delayed process in terms of the billing, etc., and the fund flow, but it has various touch points, and a lot of paper needs to move. Now one can think of saying that why cannot we have the e-POD, the electronic POD, or the apps where somebody can certify that the goods have been received? Why we cannot move to the electronic invoicing? Why any of these papers should move? Not only in light of the COVID-19, this will be a beneficial thing, but even from a sustainability point of view, it will be a great thing. So these are some of the changes which I think industry will witness, and it has to move. Now, coming back to the things which I was, in the starting, I was trying to tell, I think these changes will happen both at your personal life level as well as at the business level, etc. Now, in case of the business, of course, each industry may feel a different impact. For example, one can forecast that a travel industry or a tourism industry may take a big hit, because in future it appears that international travel become more and more difficult. Each country probably will put their own restriction or medical checks, etc., which will prohibit people traveling very frequently or very easily. So because of these changes, tourism will take a big hit. Some countries which are dependent highly on the tourism may feel the impact for a very, very long time. Same way, hospitality industry, which is linked very closely with the tourism, they may feel the pinch. But there may be opportunity for a whole set of industry. For example, the pharma obviously will have a positive impact of the whole thing. The companies which are now making the face mask or the disinfectant and other thing will have a very different positive impact on this, because it's going to stay. See, corona even after lockdown is not going to go away. It's now going to stay with us probably forever, and one has to start thinking how to live with corona, not minus the corona, and that is the most important thing. And that is why even when we are planning in our company back to work policies, we are keeping in mind that as a long-term impact, how we have to ensure that all the norms of whether it is social distancing, safety, etc., are to be performed, and how we will manage over a period of time. There may be a plan for first 3 months, then there may be a plan for next 6 months. Like that, there are different steps by which we are planning. But coming back to the impact, as I was saying, every industry may have a different impact. One of the theory which I believe in is that because of the social distancing norms, etc., probably you will see that in a city like Mumbai, where the metros or the local trains are so overcrowded, or buses are so overcrowded, that people will have a little mindset to move away from that if possible. And that may have a positive impact maybe on a two-wheeler industry sales. So a lot of people are saying that automotive industry actually will face a big problem, and people are not going to buy. But my belief is that two-wheeler industry probably will be benefited from this pandemic, while there may be impact on the high-end cars and those kind of industry. So I don't want to just go on with each industry, but each industry will have a different impact, and they'll have to start rethinking about their business model and how to come out of this crisis. So that's my view. Thank you very much.
Valuable inputs. May I now have Umesh Madhyan profile, please? Mr. Umesh is an MBA in supply chain management. He has more than 20 years of experience in sales administration, logistics, international and national physical distribution, re-engineering, process for SAP. I mean, the list is long and endless. But the point which would like to be brought to very important mention is he is the steering committee member on American Chamber of Commerce, as well as he is the present president of Chamber of Visionary Supply Chain Leaders, North India. May I now request Mr. Umesh to give his inputs on how this pandemic is going to, how FMCG is going to face the challenges, and post that we will come into the question and answer.
Thank you, Guru, for the introduction. Am I clearly audible?
Yeah.
Great. Morning, everyone. Morning, panelists. Great to be a part of this group with this kind of varied experience. The biggest thing I think which we all have realized as citizens and as well as part of this whole fraternity is that the most important element of this entire economy is the driver. We had a split between essential goods, non-essential goods. We did fall into essential goods because of water and juice. There are other organizations which fall into essential goods for disinfectants, for sanitizers, for food, for staples, etc. But do you still have abundant supply of all of these in the store next door? You still don't. Because the key element of this whole chain is the poor driver, who is right now not willing to come and drive. He is right now not willing to take the risk of coming on the job. There are people who want to grow at 60-70% like Nestle, etc. for Maggie. There are people who are growing at 8 times or 7 times, who are manufacturing sanitizers, masks, etc. But there is a huge problem in the whole economy of supply. So the supply is stuck because of this one gentleman who was the poor driver. So we have been realizing how important this driver is and what all we don't do for the driver, unlike other countries like what Shirish was explaining for the UK, the Europe and the US. There are a lot of initiatives and a lot of respect for the driver in those countries, unlike in India. So I think it is time for us to rethink and do what exactly we should do for this driver. And we, from a Coca-Cola perspective, are one of the worst hit from this whole pandemic. Like you all know, it happens to be in summer, which is the key part of the year for us in terms of doing business. So from a business perspective, there is not only Coke, but there are many such organizations in the country and outside who have lost a lot of business in terms of both net revenue as well as operating income. So there are companies who have gone 3 to 4 years earlier. So the P&L, how it used to look in 2017 is probably how it will start looking for 2020. So that's a big setback for organizations. And as a result of this, there's a lot which could happen, like what Sushil was saying. The first impact would be, I think, automation should happen, but will it really happen? Will organizations will have the affordability for it? I don't think people are going to offer capital expenditure for 12 to 18 months from now to come back from this pandemic. Automation, like Industry 4.0, is very good. It's very unique. We have already started this journey. We have IoT, we have AI, we have ASRSs, we have all the automation which we were doing so far till Q1 of 2020. But will we be able to continue to move towards that journey? I don't know, because the payback of these innovative solutions is sometimes, most of the times, not too very certain. No finance or no leadership teams of organizations will right now be willing to invest money in solutions which you want to try and see if the payback is 12 months or 4 years. So I think that will be a big deterrent. However, I think people should be priority. That's our motto. So the Coca-Cola company has gone through such crisis situations in the First World War and the Second World War, influenza pandemic, Ebola pandemic, and we have a certain formula of how to deal with it, and that formula starts with people. So the first thing which we do is we take care of people, and we try and ensure that the people do not get impacted, because they will obviously be always tense. Even though we work from home, we are there with our families, our children, but everybody has that kind of stress that what is this corona going to do to all of us and our lives. So I think capital expenditure will not happen. Automation will become tough, which is why what is the expectation from organizations like us towards OEMs is to come up with innovative solutions like SaaS. We have SaaS for software, which is not exactly a capital anymore. SAP also is now available on SaaS, and there are many such tools which can be run on SaaS. There should be a Bolt model, or there should be some such model which ensures that there is a lease kind of relationship between an OEM and organizations like us, instead of a one-time expenditure. That will help us to try a lot of new solutions. Apart from this, I feel RPA is one which has fastest kind of payback, and which has very less penetration right now in India. We have been doing a lot of it already. We have about 9 such bots working on 9 processes, but I think the scope is about still 10 times of what we do today. So RPA is something which will move more in that direction. The other is going paperless. Thankfully, we were already on this journey for the last 3-4 years, and we don't print e-way bills. They come out automatically for us. We don't print invoices. They are auto. We don't do manual signatures. We have moved to digital. So paperless investments, I think, will be a good idea to get into right now. But it will still take time, about 6 to 18 months, I feel, to come back out of this. Getting into working and preparedness for post-lockdown for both essential and non-essential services, I think, will be a bigger challenge because we are not used to having a manufacturing design which could follow a 1 meter and a 2 meter rule. We just don't have that size. Our canteen, like Shirish said, has reduced to 1/4 of its size because there could be only one guy sitting on the table. We cannot allow 2 to 3 people because we need to follow all the rules which are being given by the local authorities and the central authorities. So I think those challenges is something which we will have to work with and work from home and work a lot from home rather, will become a new normal. And I think that's my take on the industry on how it will move. Happy to share more solutions. I would also request more and more questions from the panel as well as from the audience on solutioning so that we try and learn a lot on what we can do when we go back home. That's it from me. Thank you, Guru. Over back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Umesh, for sharing your insights on how FMCG companies are gearing up for the challenges. May I now have the profile of Mr. Vivek Sarabhai, please. Yes, Mr. Vivek Sarabhai has about 28 plus years of experience. He has served in varied industries like P&G, Coke, Baxter, Mondelez. His experience is strong in supply chain management, strategic sourcing, and procurement, customer service as well. Now, may I now request Mr. Vivek to give his insights on how FMCG, one more sector, would like to look at the challenges.
Hi, everybody, and I hope everybody's safe. Thank you, Anupam and Manish, to give me this opportunity to talk to all of you. Am I audible? I just want to check that first.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So what I will, I'm not going to say which has already been said. So what I thought was that I will share my experiences of handling this crisis and while being in Middle East and Africa, so that it's just more of an experience sharing in terms of how we did things and how we are doing things now. So what we did was that we felt that this disruption will be in 3 phases. The first phase will be what I call initial shock. Just to give you an analogy, that when you play cricket, you go into bat and you find that in the first over 4 wickets are down, so you're 4 for 0. So that's the kind of situation you are in, where whatever plans you are having, they are no more valid. So I think that's the first realization, very unemotional but a courageous one to take, that the earlier you believe that your current plans are no more valid, the better is your ability to manage the shock. So that's the first phase of initial shock. It shows in more of a supply disruption, where you are really scrambling for, first you think my raw materials will not come, sometimes you feel my customers will not accept goods. But I think if I have to narrow it down, the 2 things which are very crucial were people, safety, and especially people in logistics and manufacturing. So visualizing scenario like that, because we are in food business, that if one person contacts coronavirus, we will have to shut our manufacturing line. We will not have trucks. We might produce, but if we don't have a driver, we will not be able to supply. So I think that's where the first action starts, that how do you take care of the people. The second phase, which I think is like juxtaposed to the initial one, is what I call unpredictable volatility. Now it's a more of an oxymoron, but already we know that volatility is there in demand or supply, but at this time it's extremely unpredictable. Now it will appear first in the form of, again, supply disruption, but again it will start to show you that the demand is starting to become a bit unpredictable. So what we experienced was that one of our categories started to grow. So we had a huge demand expansion, while one of the categories started to contract. So we had a huge demand contraction. So we were not sure what to do. And I think in this stage, our focus then became that how do we manage cash? because cash was probably the most important element in the P&L. Normally, large multinational companies like us, we normally have KPIs to manage cash, but we don't manage cash as foremost KPI. But I think in this stage, as we are right now in, cash has become the most important KPI. So we are talking to customers, we are talking to suppliers to manage our sales, sales outstandings and account payables. And that's also creating a bit of a relationship challenge sometimes. But I think because everybody is in this boat together, so people are a bit compassionate towards it. The third one, which I think is yet to come, is what I think where majority of the work will lie, is what I call unpredictable stability. So the stability itself will be unpredictable going forward. And I think every fellow panelist have said that coronavirus is here to stay as our guest. So how do you manage this guest? What will be the shape of recovery? Will it be V, U, V, W? I mean, all those kind of alphabets have started to come in. It will be contactless economy. So there are a lot of jargons which are also coming now. But I think it's important to understand today that whether our plans, which were there earlier anyway, which they don't exist anymore, but how do we make different scenarios for different recovery cycles? And I think people, in my view, who will do this job well will eventually be the winner. Now, some of the suggestions which I would make here to everybody is that there are certain principles with which, or values with which, if we operate, there's a likely chance of we coming out of it in a good way. The first one being that all of us will have to make short-term decisions. But how do we make sure that the decisions taken in the immediate and short term doesn't become an enemy in the long term for us? Because most of the time you'll find that in future, I'm just trying to take all of you into future, you'll find that some of the decisions which we have taken, they were not good in the short term. For example, telling a warehouse operator that, you know, cut down your management fee. I've been hearing that this is the way a lot of people are reacting. Cut down rents, cut down people. Now they are all right in the short term. I'm not disputing it, but what is the implication in the long term? If somebody has that view, it will be good. So while you negotiate or interact with the people, you can actually make that view clear to everybody. So I think that's one value which I would say is very important. I think the second one is empower and decentralize as much as you can. So things will not, I mean, even if the CEO takes a decision, it will not be better than somebody on the ground taking that decision. So it's better for the top leadership to govern, be absolutely on top of it, because at these times you need to be leading from the front. But the empowerment and decentralization of the decision making should be absolutely clear. So a factory manager should be able to hire a bus to get its manufacturing folks into the plant, doesn't need a higher level approval. Similarly, a logistic guy can actually hire a truck or give an incentive to the driver without checking with the senior person in the company. I mean, if you can get into that kind of decision making, that'd be much better. And I think overall, as business leaders, all of us will need to be tolerant to honest mistakes, because mistakes will happen. I mean, there is no way anybody can say that I will take the right decision. So I think that's where everybody will have to be a bit clear while empowering and decentralization, that, you know, we'll be honest. If you're committing an honest mistake, don't worry about it. Another one, which is, I think the biggest, I mean, somebody said, I think Unmesh said that we are probably all of us are going 2 or 3 years back in time. And that's the kind of P&L shape our organizations will have. I personally feel it could be more than 2 and 5 years because we will get into recession. There will be some industries which will absolutely have a catastrophic fall, and they will be more of a high value adding industry. So the fall on GDP will be more. There could be employment issues. So overall recession will be much more. So I think it could be more than 2 or 3 years back in time. And therefore, how do you take this opportunity to prioritize and choose innovative ideas carefully and create a robust system? Now, just to give you one example around it is, everybody is saying, and I'm reading so much of material available today, that digitalization will happen. But digitalization is without a creating of an enabling ecosystem will fall flat on the face. So a lot of organizations have put digitalization in people, teams, but if you go into depth, most of the organizations have not been able to derive the value. So you have to be very clear which area to digitalize, and then resource it adequately across the organization so that it is getting embedded in the right way. And the last caveat I would say is, and this was my experience in Middle East and Africa when I was in 2017, I mean, everybody is saying that automation will happen, we will be more dependent on IT, digitalization, but one of the things which we should be very, very careful, and while moving into this direction, is how do we make data secure? It's very, very crucial. We experienced a malware attack back in June of 2017 globally. All of our invoicing got stopped globally, and we lost more than $1 billion to $2 billion. I mean, I think it was $1.5 billion of sales we lost in a matter of 3 to 4 days. It took us 3 to 4 days to come back into a live mode. So I think when we move into this direction, we have to be absolutely cognizant of the fact that how do we build data security? How do we build more robust technology on the IT side? So that imagine today if IT attack happens in COVID world, it would be a catastrophe. So I think just a last point, concluding point from my side is go into IT. That's the way it should be. Go into blockchain. I mean, it should probably be one of the technologies which will really come up fast, but also have absolutely head around how do you make absolutely everything data secure, and prioritize in the way that we channelize our resources and don't waste it. So I mean, that's from my side. That's my concluding remark. Over to you, Guru.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable inputs and sharing your thought process on this subject. Can I have Mr. Sanjay Gupta's profile, please? Yeah, thank you. Mr. Sanjay has more than 30 years of experience in world-class manufacturing companies related to white goods, engineering, automation. Again, the list is endless. We also know him for his strengths on end-to-end supply chain management. He has worked in many organizations like Siemens, Cummins, Whirlpool, Bayer, Delphi, BLG. Again, the list is endless. He's a very passionate person on supply chain management and how to drive in continuous improvement in any sector of operations. Over to you, Sanjay sir, for your insight on the webinar.
Thanks. Thanks for the introduction, Guru, and good morning to all. I hope I am audible now, and
Yes.
Thanks for that. So Guru has asked me to speak about what are the challenges in the engineering industry that we'll be facing post-COVID, and what are the possible actions to mitigate them. I would like to thank Manish and the Gear Group to have given me this opportunity to be on the panel with such revered panelists that are there. And I'd like to share some details about this. So before I move to the topic, I would really like to add some few positive things about supply chain logistics is that it is growing at a very healthy 11 to 12% growth as compared to 6 to 7% growth of the Indian economy. And supply chain would be playing a very key role in the continuity of the business and cost control. This is an opportunity for the supply chain community to be passionate and drive continuous improvement. So there are varied types of industries. There are some industries where supply chain plays a very key role. There are some industries where supply chain takes the backseat. And this is the opportunity where supply chain can actually come in the front. Talk about planning, talk about material planning, talk about logistics, talk about supply chain, and really get it going. So let's talk about a little bit about some of the challenges and how to mitigate them. Every organization will try to make up for the losses of the last few months and try to create a top line and a bottom line, which will put immense pressure on the supply chain folks to get the right material and plan the right products. The challenges that we will face will be on liquidity, as a lot of you have highlighted. and on people again, which all of you have highlighted. There would be a cash crunch, and we will have to look for an OPEX model in all those areas where we need to burn cash. So capex is out of picture, as Umesh rightly put it. So we need to look at OPEX models, and to look at OPEX models, we will really need to understand the total cost picture, and it has to be a very realistic total cost picture. In a normal situation, the total cost picture is not very clear, or it is hidden, and the discussions take a very, very long time to decide the final course of action. And if we really want to take the bull by the horn in today's situation and make it a short-term action plan, I think this total cost picture will play a very, very important role in today's situation. The second challenge is the people. We will have to identify manpower intensive areas and automate them and digitize them. For some of the examples, control towers. We really don't see many control towers available in many organizations. And there are a lot of people involved in understanding the traffic management of the entire vehicles, the drivers and all that. A control tower is very easy to implement, in my opinion, and keeps a tab on all your shipments, all your vehicles, and the productivity of the schedulers, the people who manage the logistics, really, really goes up. Second is a real-time visibility of all the SKUs and the inventory. This is highly important. We see people doing inventory day in and day out. And if this visibility is available, you really increase the performance of the people down the line. You upskill them actually. You do not allow them to do all those dirty things day in and day out. Introduce WMS, introduce TMS, introduce electronic Kanban. These are things which can be done, and it is not being done in many industries. Some industries, like Umesh said, Coke is very, very advanced, but there are many more engineering industries which can do this, and these are all very short-term action plans that can help to do it. Sushil spoke about EPODs. So there are it's a solution which is available readily. Most of the large transporters have EPODs in the system. It's only a question of the companies to accept the EPOD from the legality point of view. And in the normal situation, it takes a hell of a amount of time to understand and to confirm and finalize on the legal aspect. But now is the time to really crunch it and get it cleared. Increase usage of material handling equipments. I think it's important that when we have shortage of people, we will have to increase the usage of material handling equipments. The productivity will definitely go up. We have there are something called predictive ETA models using machine learning and artificial intelligence for ocean shipments. We can think about using this. We have to look at all the non-value added activities that we are doing and try to outsource them with a strong governance model. And this is the right time to look at all the NVAs and start outsourcing them. But in my opinion, the most important skill that will be required by the logistics sector would be ability to see the big picture, adaptability, being calm under pressure, effective problem solving skills, being honest to the job, continually seeking improvement, proficiency in project management, and able to manage and release stress. That is my opinion, and thanks, Guru.
Thank you, Sanjay sir, for again taking us through with your valuable inputs. Oh, I see a lot of questions being coming in already. We'll be getting into the question and answer session now. I mean, it may be impractical for us to answer all the questions that are pouring in now into our question answer box. However, we would like to take few of them now. If the panelists are ready to take them, I would again go back to Mr. Sanjay on what are the areas where we talk about cost reduction which can be looked at.
Yeah, so Guru, if you look at my discussion, which I had, which I was having some time back, it's very, very important that we create change managers in the organization. And these change managers are the people who really drive cost reductions, really drive the value stream, and identify areas of non-value additions, identify areas of outsourcing, um, get into total cost optimization, understand the total cost and bring it on the table of the management and on really what is the total cost of managing the things which are there right now. Because a lot of things are hidden, and to understand the hidden aspects of total cost, someone has to be working like a businessman, and he has to understand the complete business about that situation. And that's how we should be able to reduce cost. Thanks, Guru.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sanjay, for again giving us the real perspective of how the industry will look at cost reduction at various angles. My next question will be to Mr. Umesh Madhan. Mr. Umesh, the FMCG challenges of operational cost and service is what you have already talked about with reference to the present scenario. But what will be the short-term and long-term improvement action plans which is being considered by the world's largest FMCG company, Hindustan Coca-Cola?
Sure. Thank you, Guru. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will divide this into three phases. The first one is the problems, the challenges during the lockdown. We all had to reorganize, like we said, on our manufacturing facilities, distribution center, warehouses, depots, facilities in terms of practicing proper social distance and also ensuring that the people are safe and following all the local guidelines which we had got from the local authorities, district magistrates, factory inspectorates, and so on. So I think, like I said in my earlier brief, was that the biggest problem will be the driver during the lockdown and also post-lockdown, because the driver has gone back to UP, Bihar at their home site and they just don't want to come back. So one of the actions which we thought of taking was ensuring his livelihood in case a driver is tested positive. So we had offered to all our dedicated drivers a kind of insurance policy which gives them a fixed amount of cover the moment they are tested positive. So it's not on medical, so it's not reimbursement of medical, because that anyways the government is doing. So it's more on how does he get a fixed sum for him and his family in case his quarantine period is 14, 28 days and so on. So that's one insurance which we took for all. And I think basis that the transporters were able to influence the drivers and pull them back. I think that is something which is working for us so far. And we are able to get a little bit traction on this, at least from the dedicated side of the business. Now, talking about the problem post-lockdown for the whole supply chain starting planning, I think the biggest problem is you just can't have an SNOP, you just can't have a forecast, because nobody knows exactly when will you start growing and will you start meeting numbers. So the only way out, how we see, is scenario planning. So we have different versions of scenarios which are, built. The biggest problem of forecasting we have tried to resolve by rationalizing a lot of range in the interim. So instead of providing the entire gamut of 200, 300 SKUs, the range which we offer in different geographies, we have tried to restrict it significantly. When I say significantly, it is upwards of 50% of rationalization which we are planning to do during and post the lockdown, so that we have a controlled set of SKUs which can be predicted as close as possible, and we are sure that they will go through the entire chain. And also that gives you a lot of efficiencies in terms of changeover times, etc., so that you limited range. So that is one important thing from a planning perspective, I think, which we should definitely do. From an execution and from a storage perspective, I think we are trying to do a lot of work around increasing density. So we already have a lot of dense warehousing. We are trying to increase density with trying to choose packs and storage patterns in geographies which enable them to have more dense storage instead of having something like a juice which cannot go a stack one on one and so on. So that's one strategy which we are trying to work on warehousing. On transportation, like I said, driver will remain the key. We will have to try and utilize the fixed trucks more. We will have to try and see where there are collaboration opportunities. So for example, during the lockdown, when we were only producing, shipping water and juice, we had tried to share our capacities with Unilever. So a lot of our trucks are, for the month of April, running for, even May right now, are running for Unilever in agreed shared geographies for them to support them and help us collaborate the fixed cost of the transportation. We can also do warehousing collaboration. I think that's one idea which is we've been trying to do for the last 2-3 years, but due to FDA, FSSAI, a lot of norms, it gets difficult. But this is the time exactly where we should try and push that and have collaboration on all the areas, including warehousing and transportation, and share capacities so that, we as an industry can fight this problem of productivity and savings. Because like I said, everybody has gone 2 to 3 years minimum behind time, maybe more for other companies. And it's important that you save cash. It's important that you invest smartly. And it's also important for you to have solutions which give you more productivity. So anything which I was planning to do it in December 2020, I have been pushed to pull it up in June or May and so on. So we're trying to work on a lot of things, a lot of initiatives, which will help us reap benefits out of the earlier capital which we had invested, and also try and collaborate a lot with the industry to have solutions on warehousing, on transportation, etc. So these are the kind of things which we are trying to do. Like I said, in the strategy, the first pillar always remain people, and there's a lot which is being done by people, for people. So people who are working from home, we have helplines for them in case they need medical support for them or anybody living with them. We have online medical support from them, which has been organized by the HR guys. There's a lot of stuff which is happening on people to choose whether they should come to a manufacturing site or not, on how should they choose that it is safe for them to travel, because there is an evolving categorization of hotspots or red zones, etc., etc. So I think all that is something which we are focusing on. We are trying to cut every cost except the transportation cost in terms of travel cost of people to offices, warehouses, and manufacturing sites, because we feel that the distancing in the vehicles is also equally important. Like somebody was saying, people in a 32-seater bus, today there are only 10 to 12 people there. So you will need more transport, you will need more vehicles, because you will still want to run full steam at the manufacturing site. So I think these are the couple of things which we are doing. And in terms of investments also for capital, like I said, we will try and convert. We have already converted about 2 to 3 projects on automation of material movement, for example, into a lease kind of a model or a TCO kind of model, where we will try and avoid infusion of capital. And as of now, run on a total cost of ownership model, which will be given by the OEMs and move on. But we will try and accelerate RPA to a very, very significant extent in the coming 6 to 18 months. That's it, Guru. Happy to answer more questions.
I mean, it was pleasure to hear you, Umesh sir, on the real-time strategies being looked at by Hindustan Coca-Cola on looking at the operational cost as well as service support which they need to do during these scenarios. And post-COVID as well, you have tried to brief us what are the plans which Hindustan Coca-Cola is keeping in front of them to see that they bring everything of the cost under very well managed situation. Thank you so much there. And then now I may request Sushil Prati sir to just give us an insight. He has already spoken about it, but nevertheless, this is a question again coming up by some of the participants. How is 3PL supply chain management now, and how are the industries which are addressing these challenges to the post COVID scenario, or how are they presently? We have already discussed one time. What is the post-COVID scenario, which the challenges which can come up? Is a question coming up again from some of the participants.
Sure. So currently, of course, while the government is bringing out a lot of facilities in terms of the movement of goods, it started with essential and now again with the non-essential also. Am I audible?
Little bit weak, but you can increase your volume, sir. Yeah, better.
Okay. So the government is, of course, coming out with various initiative in terms of starting the movement of goods. It started with the essential goods and now the non-essential also. If you see some of the new guidelines which have come, very specifically talks about not stopping any truck movement at any of the borders, etc. But there is still a problem in terms of what the central government is planning vis-a-vis what the state governments are implementing, and there is always a little bit of gap. And because of that, the supply chain is still constrained as of this moment. While a large chunk of the stranded trucks we have now planned to move and take it to the destination. But of course, there are two types of problem. One is facing one. A lot of drivers have left the truck and have moved to the village because of their issues, and many of them are now planning to return back. We are facilitating the entire thing. All the trucks which were stranded on the roads, every day we were providing the food facility as well as the other facilities to our drivers, making sure that they are taken care at this juncture. We have also tied up and provided the cash facilities to lots of drivers, thousands of drivers, where we would like to support at this juncture any problem if they are facing, etc. Having said that, there are many things which at ground level are still a hindrance, and which gradually, as the coordination between the central government and state government is improving, I'm sure this will go away and the movements, etc., will become smoother. But some areas which still I think a lot needs to be done is on the export import front. The ports are still very congested. A lot of movement is still restricted, and that is something which I think has to be taken up on priority. And if there the government can also focus and move a little bit faster, that will help a lot. Second, when the government is planning to lift the lockdown and start the industry, probably we'll have to look at the upstream and downstream, both these scenarios are covered or not. Because in many industry, if even if they would like to start, if their suppliers are not ready or not geared up, or if they are in the red zone, then you may not find the either the raw material or components to make the final product. So that is the one area which is worrying the supply chain guys in terms of how to make sure that the entire supplies are available for manufacturing. And of course, it will take time. Things will gradually improve, and that is why we believe very strongly that all the manufacturing, etc., will also come up in phase-wise manner. And that is where we have also planned to support all our customers by doing the phase-wise ramp up. We are talking very closely with all our 18,000 odd employees, out of which a lot many are third-party workers. We are engaged with them through our HR teams. We are trying to ascertain what are their challenges, what difficulties they have, and how do we overcome that. We have thousands of drivers. We are all in touch with them in terms of understanding how they can come back to work how they can get back to the trucks on which they are operating, and how they can move that, and what problems they are facing. We are trying to work on that. Apart from that, as some of the other panelists have talked about, there is a very detailed plan in terms of getting back to work, in terms of the safety and the people first policy. We have created incident management teams at central level and at zonal level to identify each and every employee when it comes back to the work, what is his condition or her condition. If there is anything to go wrong, then how we will react in that situation, what will be the various policies and procedures to be followed in such scenario. All this thing has been put in a very detailed form, and to make sure that not only that our people are safe, but in the customer premises where we are working, we don't become a hindrance in terms of stopping the work at that point of time. So these are the various things which have been done. Coming to the post-COVID scenario, as I mentioned even earlier, one should now look at the positive side of this in terms of what can be the new normal. And one of the interesting thing which we have been hearing from the industry experts, we have been reading in the newspaper, etc., is that globally the supply chain de-risking possibly will take place. The over dependence on China probably will move away. A lot of countries and the companies will like to see that they have an alternative manufacturing site or supply site, and that is where I think country like India should try and grab the major share of that business, for which I think I heard the Prime Minister also putting a task force in place in terms of making sure that companies get attracted to India, and maybe we may need to change quickly certain policies, etc., so that the international companies find it attractive enough to choose India as the base. So that will be another big positive which may come up in future.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your insight on addressing how third-party logistics supply chain management is looking at the challenges in the present and post-COVID scenarios. Now, can I take a question with Mr. Vivek Sarabhai on the supply chain challenges of FMCG industries? Umesh has already spoken much about it, but there's a participant who would like to know, other than Hindustan Coca-Cola, what will other FMCG companies look at the supply chain challenges?
I think it's a great question. So I think the challenges, as I said, will be in three phases. So first challenge is definitely to keep our people safe. And to that extent, I think there'll be a lot of initiatives both in the manufacturing side, and we will be also taking the area of logistics. How do we create segregating zones? How do we take care of the overall, the culture which we need to inculcate both in the manufacturing sites and while dealing with our transporters? How do we work with the transporters and understand their systems, whether they are taking all the precautions with their drivers, what are the kind of insurance policies they have for the drivers? So I think we'll all get into all that so that, at least how do we get somebody to drive or to come into the manufacturing site and observe social distancing on a continuous basis? It's a big challenge. So I think there will be a lot of programs which we will probably come up to ensure that the training and education, continuous education happens. I think the second aspect is how do we start to automate some of it, and I think we will. My strategy would be to tie up with vendors who are already in this space instead of we trying to do things ourselves. And I think one of the things which we will probably do is how do we make our whole cost more variable and less fixed. So which will mean that I think one of the panelists talked about SaaS, and I think how do we get all other services also on a variable basis? Can we get into warehousing on a variable basis? So I think that will be the second thing. The third thing which we will do is, while going for cost reduction, we will also be mindful of the fact, are we contributing to recession? So can we cut the rate or we cut the volume? So I think with overall recession definitely coming in, I mean, I would rather have an approach of reducing salaries or converting salaries more into variable, giving furloughs instead of just going and cutting headcount all over the place or cutting structural cost. So I would rather collaborate with the ecosystem and say that we are in the same situation, all of us. The best way is that we make ourselves affordable instead of contributing to job losses, which will eventually, in a macroeconomic sense, will come and bite back all of us. So I think that's a third thing which we will try to do on cost savings. The fourth is structural costs. I think it's a great initiative, great opportunity for us, because normally India is a growing market. So you tend to look forward and prepare yourself for growth. I think it will be first time probably in India where we will be looking at negative growths across all. I think all of us will have to come up to that level of expertise that we will have a situation where things will be going down the hill. And I don't think, at least I can tell about my experience, I've always seen growth in India. So how do I, first of all, change my mindset? How do I become more structurally efficient? So whether our current structural costs, look at supply network optimization, for example, I'm just making it up at this moment, that what will be my network for a 25% lower volume or 35% volume or a 10% volume, instead of we always trying to look at network, how will I grow in 10, 15, 20%? I think that's the way to look at it. Look at inventories very, very carefully, because cash for the next 18 to 24 months will probably be the most important thing to watch out for. So cash will be in the pivot or in the center of all decision making. So normally we look at cost, sometimes we look at service, sometimes we look at inventory as a logistic function. But I think this time we'll have to look at every aspect and how do we accurately balance all these conflicting objectives with cash also in the focus. So it's not just inventory, it's also the cash. So I think that's another thing. Long term, I would rather say that it's also a great opportunity to carve out what is the capability you need in future. And which is where I was, trying to highlight earlier, that when you embark on digitalization, you will have to look at capability to manage digitalization, sustain digitalization. So what are the kind of skills you need for a digital world in the organization? I think it's a good time to understand, assess, and then start building programs, if not immediately, but whenever we embark on that journey. I think so. So the last one I would recommend is, when we do all this together, we have to drive collective intelligence. So we have to be more open and inclusive, choose your partners for the long term now, involve them in their decision making. They will be a valuable source of information, both in short term as well as and from a technology side. And I would rather co-create a strategy and then embark on it jointly, instead of trying to figure it out myself or as a company, not involving others. So this is what we are trying to do, and we will probably end up doing. If anybody wants to have further details, you can ask him to write to me, or we can talk later.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you have given us a very detailed insight of how an FMCG company like Mondelez is trying to address these issues post the COVID scenario. I have one more question coming up for Mr. Shirish Bide. How is manufacturing industry working to mitigate the challenges of logistics in the present context? How is it poised to take challenges of the near future?
Okay. So, can you hear me?
Sir, yes, sir.
Okay. So, I think as manufacturing industry, we are working on top three priorities at this point of time, which are from short term to medium term to long term. And these are divided into three verticals: people, customers, and the business to sustain. So all the measures around sustaining the business. So already, we heard about how we can convert all our fixed costs into variable costs. So this is something that we have taken up with all our service providers. And one of the things that we are looking in the logistics arena is there a way of, doing some quick industry 4 application implementation? Like for all, we have a lot of returnable skids in the system. So we are trying to work on, can we introduce and partially which is done, RFID or similar technique, so that we can track those skids real time, which will not only improve which will improve 3 things. One is the number of skids required in the system. The second is the optimization of the transport, returnable transport of those skids, reverse logistics. And the third is also it is going to help for us to, reach out to the right areas and locations and customers to get those skids back. So this is just an example, but what we are basically trying to do is we are trying to work on how can we optimize the requirement of the people in the logistics area so that we can optimize on logistics cost, but at the same time become efficient. The second is we are trying to look at opportunities of total cost optimization. So when I say this, as Cummins, we have a lot of processes where we get the material from tier 1 supplier and send it to the tier 2 supplier for further value adding. And here we are trying to really work, and we have got some good breakthroughs in this lockdown period, where we have converted those models into directly tier 1 working with tier 2, which is helping us a lot in terms of optimizing the logistics cost, inventory carrying cost. And this is really helping us in the third vertical, which I said, business continuity, where we're able to address some costs in the P&L. The third thing we are doing is, in order to optimize the logistics cost and the number of trucks that we need, we are also trying to work on an initiative where how can we improve the utilization of trucks. So we are trying to look for some stacking models where the same truck, instead of carrying X number of goods, can carry 2X, just because of the stacking by modifying the skids and skid designs. So this is something, I think this is a work in progress. Right now, I don't have the data which says that it is successfully implemented, but we are certainly working on it, and I am very confident we'll be able to get some breakthrough on that. And lastly, I will talk about, what we did from the logistics point of view is we are in the industry where we import a lot of material and we also export our goods. So we have found one breakthrough solution in one of our couple of our plants, where the earlier practice was we were using the containers which are coming for import. We were letting them go, and a lot of our export was driven by Ex Works Incoterm, where customers were deciding the freight forwarders. We are somehow were able to bring our customers in line with our thinking and connected them with our service providers or freight forwarders. And that is how we are able to use the incoming inbound import containers, the same containers to be used as outbound export containers with the same shipping line and freight forwarder, which is helping us a lot. About 30% of container usage, we were able to bring it down. And this is not only a cost benefit, but it is a lot of non-valuated stuff. The transport, our plants are in Pune, so transport between Mumbai, Pune, empty containers moving on those roads is completely, or 30% we were able to optimize so far. So these are the few tips that I would like to share as to what we are doing as manufacturing industry in the logistics area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for an in-depth explanation of what is being done to mitigate the challenges on logistics within the manufacturing industry. I have one more question coming in, which talks about, I think this can be clubbed into two questions into one. How standardization and automation will be the change makers required to meet the rapid changes with constrained resources? I would like Mr. Anupam Kashyap to take this question because in the initial stages of his discussion, he talked about automation as well as standardization. Over to Mr. Anupam Kashyap, please.
Great. Thanks, Guru. I think we should not try to live in a fool's paradise or in a world which says that since it's COVID, since it's the social distancing, since it's 10 other things, the world will change and people will fund the projects which does not have an ROI. So ROI driven investment, and as Umesh mentioned, probably earlier it was 1.5 years, 2 years payback. Now it's 6 months, 9 months, 10 months. So how do we make the investments and solution nimble, which means cut the solutions into smaller bits and solve for the smallest. So if you have a Pareto of your entire business situation, probably cut the business into smaller segment and do the Pareto of the smaller segment and invest for the biggest problem of the smaller segment. That's probably 20% of your pain versus trying to solve 60% of the pain at 10 times the cost. You know, it's again, I'm staying a little utopian here and a little theoretical, but that's a very important way, the way you look at a problem. So if you want to solve the entire big problem, you may not have the money to do it. Better to cut the problem into 3 pieces, take the most complex piece out of it, again, do a Pareto on that with reference to root cause and solve for the biggest cause in that. That is what will gel with what Shirish talked about in the example of innovation with reference to the skates, or what Umesh talked about with reference to being 3 years back in terms of our ability to invest. I think that's where the key important thing is. Automation is the key. I think all of us probably vehemently agreed on this particular point, whether it's EPOD, whether it's utilization of people, etc., etc. But I want to leave a thought that there will not be free lunches. It has to be ROI driven. It will have to be driven by the return on investment, and thus cutting off the solutioning to a level where it is digestible and we are able to afford it will be the key thing. So that's my take on it, Guru.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the questions are pouring in. I don't know. It will be very, very difficult to answer all the questions coming in the way it is pouring in now. But nevertheless, I would like to take 1 or 2 of them, if the panelists permit and agree upon giving us some replies on these questions. I have one thing which can come in as what was being mentioned as China being an industrial hub now, manufacturing hub, opportunities which can get shifted into India. The question coming here is non-Chinese companies. We are hearing many non-Chinese companies withdrawing manufacturing from China. What is the opportunity for India? Will India become the next manufacturing hub as a replacement to China? Again, I think I would request either Mr. Sirish or Mr. Anupam to take this question related to more on manufacturing hubs. I'm not saying the other panelists are not capable of answering, but the in-depth knowledge that which I can see with the interaction with Sirish has talked about manufacturing as a base. I would like one of you to take this question.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I think at least the experience that we are experiencing in Cummins world is, I think China has very strongly come back with the demand post the COVID situation. And you will be surprised that we are seeing actually, since we export to China, we are actually having a lot of pressure right now to export our goods to China. So I am really not sure. As far as the Chinese government is concerned, I think they are putting a lot of effort in terms of investing in infrastructure, which they were doing historically. But at the same time, the supplies that we do are to a lot of data center industries. And these data centers are certainly not Chinese companies, but they are also coming from outside and starting business in China. And we are seeing a higher demand. So right now, I'm not sure that that is what is going to happen. But certainly, while I'm saying that, for Indian point of view, what chance we very clearly see is, as I mentioned, while Europe and US both are still working, I think they are working with significantly lesser capacity at this point of time, because they are worst hit by Corona, and they have decided to, because of social distancing, dramatically reduce their manned capacities. So they are practically working at a level of 60-65% of capacities, as we understand. And this is the same situation with a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers in Europe and US that we are experiencing. I think this is our opportunity to, first of all, get some business out of these places into India. And like one of our suppliers is having a big hub in Mexico and Italy, and both these places are closed down at the moment. And these businesses are really thinking about coming and starting the business in India, because Cummins, from the product point of view, being engine manufacturer, have a lot of source approval requirements. We have to do some tests in order to qualify a product. So these suppliers have a benefit that if they can relocate their machines, that requirement of source approval goes down dramatically. It's only the change of place and change of people. So with limited validation, these products can be introduced quickly. And these are some of the opportunities I very clearly see coming from the Western world more than the Eastern world. Thank you.
Sir, request you to kindly stay on. There is one question related to this same again, wherein somebody is asking, why is the cost of manufacturing in India high as compared to that of China?
So I think it is a myth, in my opinion, that the cost of manufacturing is high in India compared to China. The reason I'm saying that is in China, there is a lot of government subsidy and government support available from the taxation point of view for the raw material. So raw material cost, you will find in India, our suppliers pay much more for the same raw material as compared to the same raw material that is used in China. So that is one difference that I have clearly noticed. The second is the China cost for the manufacturing labor as well as their managerial costs. I think very clearly China is ahead of India, and their labor and managerial costs are again higher. The benefit that they get again on the other end is the government gives a lot of support and subsidy for the income tax, which typically brings the cost of the entire product at the end very much comparable or lesser than India. But I don't agree and believe that the manufacturing cost in China is lower than that of India.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I think we have already shot more than the stipulated time that we were having for this webinar. It was supposed to be from 11 to 12:30. We are already at 12:40. Is it okay with the panelists? Can I request to take one or two more questions which are coming in? I mean, the questions are still flowing in. Can I take one or two questions?
Yeah, please go ahead.
That's right.
One of the questions which is there is, which is the biggest cost contributor in a supply chain management perspective? So I think Umesh, Mr. Sushil, or anybody, I think it is left to you, sir, to.
Yeah, I think very, very generic as a question, depends on industry to industry. In many industries, manufacturing is a significant contribution to the total. In industry like ours, it will be logistics, because it is all about cost as a percentage to the net revenue. And if the net revenue or the pricing is as low as 10 rupee Coke bottle, then kitna bhi kam aapka logistics cost ho as a percentage, it will always look very high. So it really depends on a lot industry to industry, and it's a very generic as a question. I don't think related to COVID.
Okay. We have one more question which we would take now. Yeah, I think this has been answered, but nevertheless, the question has come back again. What immediate steps that can be taken to improve productivity? I think it has been already said that automation, digitization, smart factory, industry 4.0 will be the future focus to see how we.
Guru, this is Anupam. Let me just take that and answer that question in very two lines.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I think
Thank you
it
so
is
much.
a little different than what has been spoken. And the question is, what are the immediate steps? Let's go back to what Shirish said. at the starting. Immediate steps, you don't need to rock the ship, you don't need to shake the boat. You need to start doing simple things first. Social distancing at the punching machine to begin with, for example, and those kind of things. So do simple things, maybe a list of 10 or 20, depending on each factory, warehouse, location, as the case may be. And those simple things are the first thing. So immediate to do would be probably that. It may appear to be as if I am sort of preaching or sort of giving gyan, but trust me, in the immediate term, in the post-COVID world, you don't need to do too many big things. Do 10 small things and start your operations. Learn from it. There will be chaos, there will be new learning, there will be new experiences, and then decide where does Industry 4.0 fits in, where does ROI-based investments fit in, where does a lot of other things fit in. But begin small and then move forward. But immediate is take care of lives and take care of and start the business.
Thank you so much, Anupam sir. I have one, I think I'll go for one last question if you, the team permits me. Do you look at job cutting with the scenario that we are talking about, downsizing, improvement, which is happening? Maybe there may be automation, reduction in number of people who are going to operate. Is job cutting as one of the things which is on the anvil? Is the fear what people also have post-COVID?
I had answered, somebody had asked this question and I had answered there. See, one has to look at the impact, the magnitude of impact on each industry would be very, very different. It is also about how much you can sustain, what is your cash position, and how long you can sustain that. But I think a better option to start with would be, rather than looking at the job cuts, whether you can look at the salary cuts across the board to manage and still retain the jobs of the people. Obviously, companies will start now looking at in terms of which are the jobs which can be performed from home, which are the jobs which probably can be, people can be trained to do multitasking more and more. I mean, the more focus will come. Not that in the past people were not thinking about it, but now more focus will come. Definitely in short term, I find that the new jobs, for example, people who are now graduating, etc., will find it tough now to enter the industry because companies would like to kind of, manage with the current set of people rather than looking at hiring a new set of people. So many things are going to definitely change. Of course, the job cuts may also happen, but I think each company will take its own plan. They will think about how to really manage this whole situation.
Thank you very much, sir. I think if we have already shot up to 12:45 now, anticipating that we'll find it difficult to manage that time, or we expected this to be a very short webinar, but it is running quite long. I'm sorry, I don't know whether our participants will get disheartened by me cutting down the whole webinar time, but we need to look at our panelists as well. So if I think we would like to close this, if Mr. Manish, can I take the opportunity of saying the vote of thanks?
Yeah, please, Guru.
Yeah. I think we had a very, very good session today on how these challenges are going to be addressed by various industries across the country, having also worldwide experiences which are being operated here in India. We also thank the participants to be so much enthusiastic in understanding the real insights of the challenges which has been addressed by the industry experts. Gear Group CEO Mr. Manish Walia and the entire team would like to thank all the panelists for extending their support and giving up their expert opinion on the subject. We also thank all the participants for participating in this live webinar. Thank you very much. All the best. Stay home, stay safe.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you, Arupam.
Thank you. Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Suresh.
Thank you, sir.